Connor Hilton looked straight at the judge with an eerily calm demeanor, occasionally smirking, as if what was happening in front of him was just a routine legal proceeding.
Friendswood 911, what's the location of your emergency?
Right South Street. I heard 2 guns fired. Please hurry. They're both shot. Both of my friends. I think the killer's still in the house. I don't know. He's my friend now.
On September 2nd, 2025, in the courtroom, Connor Hilton, then 19 years old, appeared to plead guilty in a case that had shaken the entire Friendswood community for nearly 2 years. 2 years earlier, on the night of December 23, 2023, 2 gunshots rang out inside his home. One friend died. Another survived severe brain injury. But in that moment, Connor Hilton did not look like someone facing the consequences of a horrific crime. His lawyers had prepared a narrative. According to them, Connor was not a cold-blooded killer.
Did you form an opinion as to whether or not Connor was suffering from psychosis on the night of the incident in this case that he is charged?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Is that he had a medication-induced psychotic disorder.
The real culprit was a powerful acne medication called Accutane, or isotretinoin. They claimed the drug could cause severe psychiatric disturbances and make a teenager completely lose control of his behavior. The Hilton family also believed that explanation. They described Connor as a gentle boy who had never been in trouble with the law, a normal teenager before the drug entered his life. In the courtroom that day were Ben Blick, the friend who survived the gunshot to the head, the family of Ethan Riley, the 18-year-old who died in the hospital one day after the shooting, also sat in the rows behind the prosecution. And on the other side of the courtroom, prosecutor Kayla Allen did not buy the drugstore. During the investigation, detectives had discovered something else in Connor Hilton's phone data and online activity. Seizures related to murder, violent videos, posts about wanting to become important and leave a mark. Those details began to raise a question that no lawyer could easily answer. Did Connor Hilton truly lose control because of a pill, or had thoughts of violence been present long before anyone mentioned Accutane? This is the case of a teenager who shot 2 of his friends inside his own family home on the night before Christmas. And every detail I'm about to show you has been verified through court records, police reports, digital investigation data, and testimony at trial. The night of December 23, 2023 began like many other evenings in the quiet Friendswood, Texas neighborhood. Homes on LaSalle Street were decorated with Christmas lights, wreaths hung on front doors, and many families were preparing for the holiday just 2 days away. No one in the neighborhood had any reason to think that night would end with police sirens, flashing red and blue lights, and a crime scene. Inside one house on that street, Connor Hilton, then 17 years old, was home alone while his parents were away. For a teenager, having a free evening in an empty house was not particularly unusual. Connor began texting friends. They were simple invitations asking who was free and could come over to hang out before the holiday break. Such gatherings were not uncommon for teens in the Friendswood area. No big plans, no loud parties. Just a few friends meeting in the living room, talking, scrolling on phones, passing time before Christmas. Eventually, 3 showed up. Ethan Riley, 18 years old. Benjamin Ben Bleak, 19 years old, and a 15-year-old teenager who later became the case's most important witness. Ethan and Ben both knew Connor from before. They were part of the same friend group in the area and had hung out many times. None of them walked into that house feeling they were in danger. According to what was later reconstructed from testimony and evidence, the initial atmosphere inside the house was completely normal. The teens sat and talked like any other casual hangout. Then at some point that evening, Connor Hilton retrieved a handgun from inside the house. What happened next unfolded extremely quickly. 2 gunshots rang out in the room. Ethan Riley was shot in the head. Ben Bleak was also shot in the head. The distance between the shooter and the victims was very close. There was no indication this was a random accident. The 15-year-old friend who witnessed it almost immediately fell into panic. He ran to find a phone and called 911. In the recorded call, his voice trembled as he told the dispatcher that 2 friends had been shot inside the house. The moments that followed passed in chaos. When Friendswood police received the call and arrived at the scene, they did not find a suspect trying to flee. Instead, they saw Connor Hilton sitting on the curb right in front of the house. He did not run. He did not try to leave the area. He just sat there waiting as patrol cars pulled up. Officers entered the house and immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Ethan Riley and Ben Bleak lay on the floor, both with severe head wounds. Blood pooled across the floor. Paramedics were called urgently. Ethan and Ben were rushed to ambulances in critical condition and transported to a nearby hospital. Doctors began a race to keep them alive. But for Ethan Riley, the injuries were too severe. On December 24, 2023, just one day after the shooting, Ethan was pronounced dead at the hospital. Ben Bleek survived, but the cost was enormous. The bullet caused severe brain injury. For many weeks afterward, Ben underwent surgery and long-term hospital care before being transferred to a rehabilitation center to begin relearning basic skills. At the scene, Connor Hilton was taken into custody by police that same night. A 17-year-old teenager. 2 gunshots, 2 victims, 1 dead, 1 surviving with lifelong injuries. At the time, Connor was only 17. Detectives later said their first impression of Connor did not match the image typically seen in a suspect who had just committed a serious shooting. He spoke softly, answered, "Yes, sir," and "No, sir," almost overly polite, more like a student being questioned by a teacher than someone who had just shot 2 of his friends. In the initial minutes of questioning, Connor gave his first explanation for what happened in the house that night. According to him, the gun had accidentally discharged. He said it was an accident. No plan, no intent to kill. Just a moment of losing control while handling the gun. But as investigators pressed for more specific details, that story quickly developed holes. If it was an accident, why were there 2 shots? If the gun discharged once, what explained the second shot? And if it was an accident, why were both Ethan Riley and Ben Bleek shot in the head at close range? When questioned about those points, Connor changed his story. This time, he said it was self-defense. He suggested one of the 2 friends had lunged at him, but even that self-defense story did not hold up when compared to what the 15-year-old witness told police and what investigators saw at the scene. No signs of a struggle, no evidence Connor had been attacked. As the interrogation continued, Connor's demeanor began to shift. At times, he bowed his head. At times, he appeared confused. And then, according to the detectives, Connor finally said something that made the entire room go silent. He admitted that thoughts of killing had entered his mind before, not that night, not because of an argument, but from some time earlier. According to Connor, he had thought about shooting someone, though he said he had no specific target. That admission immediately shifted the investigation in a different direction. Detectives began considering the possibility that this was not an accident or a spontaneous act. They started examining Connor Hilton's phone, computer, and online accounts. What they found began to paint a disturbing picture. In Connor's video watch history and internet activity, there was a great deal of content related to violence and murder. Connor had watched numerous videos about famous murder cases, criminal investigations, and true crime stories. Detectives also discovered internet searches related to murder and similar topics. In addition, there were social media posts showing Connor's strong interest in violent cases. Some of his online content displayed clear curiosity about murders and how they were investigated. As police continued speaking with people who knew Connor, they began hearing similar stories. Some friends said Connor had talked about wanting to become important, wanting to do something that would make people pay attention to him. One friend recalled Connor saying he wanted to leave a mark. Those statements might initially sound like impulsive teenage talk, but when placed alongside 2 gunshots in the house on LaSalle Street, their meaning began to change. For the prosecution, the digital data, watch videos, internet searches, and conversations with friends began forming a chain of evidence. A chain showing an obsession with violence that existed long before the night of December 23. Investigators also examined the timing of this content. Many videos and posts were found in Connor's activity history from months before the shooting. That led them to believe Connor's interest in violence was not a fleeting curiosity but had existed over a prolonged period. As these details gradually emerged during the investigation, the Hilton family also began searching for an explanation for what happened. Connor's relatives said he was not a teenager with a history of violence, no criminal record, no serious trouble at school. For them, the image of Connor pulling the trigger on 2 of his friends seemed inconsistent with the person they believed they had raised for years, so they began looking for an explanation. Something that could account for why a normal evening before Christmas turned into a crime scene. While reviewing Connor's medical history, the family noticed a detail. According to dermatology records, Connor had been prescribed the acne medication Accutane, scientifically known as isotretinoin, around July 2022. This is a powerful drug commonly used to treat severe acne cases when other methods fail. Accutane had been used for many years, but it came with clear warnings about potential mental health side effects. Some patients had reported symptoms of depression, mood changes, and even suicidal thoughts while taking the drug. Connor's medical records showed that after starting Accutane, he had told his doctor he felt depressed and showed signs of depression. Connor later paused the medication for a time before resuming treatment. That detail quickly became the centerpiece of the defense strategy as the case approached approached trial, Connor's legal team hired a psychiatrist to evaluate his case. That person was Dr. Douglas Bremner, a professor of psychiatry and radiology at Emory University School of Medicine. Bremner had researched the effects of isotretinoin on the brain and human behavior. After reviewing records and interviewing Connor, Bremner offered a hypothesis that later became the core of the defense argument. According to him, Connor Hilton may have experienced a drug-induced psychotic state at the time of the shooting. Bremner said that in some rare cases, isotretinoin could affect brain regions involved in emotional control and behavior. According to Connor, when speaking with the expert, those psychological changes began after he started the medication. Connor told Bremner that during the treatment period he began experiencing dark thoughts, not just sadness or depression. He told Bremner he had suicidal thoughts and sometimes even thoughts of killing others. According to Connor, those thoughts made him feel scared and confused, and he did not know why they appeared. For the defense team, this explanation provided a completely different understanding of what happened in the house on LaSalle Street. They argued that Connor was not a premeditated killer. According to them, he was a teenager who fell into a psychotic state due to the side effects of a powerful drug. But the prosecution saw the events very differently. For them, what Connor did immediately after the shooting showed he was still fully aware of his actions. Right in the first interrogation, Connor tried to construct an accident story. When that story did not hold up, he switched to self-defense. The prosecution argued that those attempts to change his account showed Connor understood his actions had serious legal consequences and was trying to avoid responsibility. For them, that did not fit the image of someone completely out of control due to psychosis. As the case approached trial, the debate over motive became the center of every argument. One side said the Acne pills had altered Connor's brain and pushed him into a state of loss of control. The other side said Connor knew exactly what he was doing on the night of December 23, 2023. In that question, drug side effects or personal intent would become the focus of the entire upcoming trial. By the summer of 2025, the Connor Hilton case entered its decisive phase. After nearly 2 years of investigation, arguments, and case preparation, both the prosecution and defense knew the upcoming trial would revolve around a single question. Did Connor Hilton kill his two friends because of a pre-existing intent, or because of the side effects of a powerful acne medication? In August 2025, the court held an important hearing to resolve an issue that could shape the entire defense strategy. That issue was whether Dr. Strategy, Douglas Bremner, the defense-hired psychiatric expert, would be allowed to testify as an expert witness before the jury. Bremner was a professor of psychiatry and radiology at Emory University School of Medicine, and he had spent many years researching the impact of isotretinoin on the brain. For the defense team, his testimony was central to the entire story they wanted to tell in court. They argued that Connor Hilton had experienced a drug-induced psychotic state at the time of the shooting. According to them, Accutane could affect brain regions involved in emotional control and behavior, causing some patients to experience extreme thoughts they had never had before. But the prosecution, led by prosecutor Kayla Allen, strongly challenged that argument. During the hearing, Allen argued that recent scientific studies did not prove isotretinoin increased the risk of violent behavior or homicide. She said allowing an expert to present such a hypothesis to the jury could mislead the case. According to the prosecution, the issue of the case was not a pill. It lay in what Connor Hilton did and what he said after being arrested. Allen reiterated that Connor had tried to construct multiple different stories during the initial interrogation, from accident to self-defense. For the prosecution, that showed Connor understood his behavior was wrong and was trying to avoid responsibility. After hearing arguments from both sides, the judge made a decision with major impact on the defense strategy. The court allowed Dr. Bremner to testify as an expert, but only during the sentencing phase if Connor was convicted. That meant in the guilt phase, when the jury had to decide whether Connor committed murder, testimony about the drug-induced psychosis hypothesis would not be presented. For the defense team, this was a major blow to their strategy. The main trial was officially scheduled for September 2025. Under Texas law, Connor Hilton could face a very wide sentencing range if convicted. The jury could impose a minimum of 5 years in prison, but it could also go up to 99 years or even life imprisonment. That forced both sides to carefully weigh their strategies. For the prosecution, they believed the scene evidence, witness testimony, and digital data were sufficient to prove Connor intentionally fired the gun, but they also understood that juries can sometimes be influenced by the defendant's age. Connor was still very young when the crime occurred. For the defense team, the situation was even more difficult. They had just lost the opportunity to present the drug psychosis argument in the guilt phase, and now faced the risk that the jury would focus on the shooting's consequences and quickly reach a conclusion. In the weeks leading up to trial, both sides continued preparing files, interviewing witnesses, and considering various legal scenarios. But about 2 weeks before the trial was set to begin, a turning point occurred. The prosecutor's office made a formal offer. They presented a plea deal. Under that offer, Connor Hilton would plead guilty to murder in the death of Ethan Riley and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against Ben Blick. In exchange, the prosecution would recommend a 50-year prison sentence. If Connor rejected it and the case went to trial before a jury, the sentence could be much harsher if convicted. In the worst case, Connor could face life imprisonment. The final decision rested with Connor Hilton. It was a pivotal choice. Accepting the deal meant officially admitting to murder and accepting decades in prison. Rejecting it meant placing his future in the hands of a jury and accepting the risk of a far heavier sentence. After consulting with his lawyer and family, Connor Hilton ultimately decided to accept the plea deal. On September 2, 2025, in the Galveston County, Texas courtroom, the courtroom that day was packed. On one side was the Hilton family. On the other were those still living with the consequences of the night of December 23, 2023. Ben Blick was present in the room, sitting with his mother. Ethan Riley's family was also there, quietly following every word in court. When the judge began the hearing, Connor Hilton was asked to confirm that he understood the charges and the legal consequences of pleading guilty. The charges were read clearly in court. Murder in connection with the death of Ethan Riley and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against Ben Blick. When asked whether he pleaded guilty or not, Connor Hilton answered with one short word: guilty. That plea officially closed the debate over whether Connor was the one who pulled the trigger. What remained in the hearing were statements from those directly affected by the case. Throughout the process, Connor stood before the court, sometimes bowing his head. When the judge recounted the details of the case, Connor began to cry. He wiped his tears, occasionally taking deep breaths, trying to stay composed. But that reaction did not make everyone in the courtroom feel it was genuine remorse. Some people present later said they believed those tears came from fear of the many years in prison ahead, not from pain over what happened to his two friends. After the plea, the court allowed victims and their families to speak before sentencing was imposed. Ben Blick was one of the first to stand and speak. 2 years earlier, Ben had been shot in the head inside the very house where he thought he was going to hang out with friends. The bullet caused severe brain injury and required a long recovery process. When standing before the court, Ben spoke directly to Connor Hilton. No beating around the bush, no hiding emotion. Ben said what Connor did had changed his life forever. And then Ben said something the entire courtroom heard clearly. He said he would never forgive Connor Hilton. After Ben, his mother also spoke before the court. She did not just talk about the months in the hospital, the surgeries, and the recovery process her son had to endure. She also criticized the Hilton family for a decision she believed contributed to the tragedy. She mentioned the gun in the house where the shooting occurred. According to her, a 17-year-old should not have easy access to a gun in the home. She said if that gun had not been there, her son might not have had to go through what happened that night. Then came Ethan Riley's family. Ethan had died in the hospital on December 24, 2023, just 1 day after the shooting. Ethan's loved ones spoke about the person they lost, a young man, only 18 years old with his whole life ahead of him. They spoke about Ethan's laughter, his personality, and the void his death left in the family. While those statements echoed in the courtroom, Connor Hilton stood before the court, silently listening. No arguing, no rebuttal. Just a teenager now turned defendant in a murder case, standing between two families talking about what they had lost. When the courtroom door closed, the final legal procedures of the plea deal continued to be completed in court. Under the terms previously agreed upon by both sides, the judge proceeded to formally record the sentence for Connor Hilton. Under this agreement, Connor Hilton was sentenced to 50 years in the Texas state prison system. That sentence reflected the punishment level the prosecution and defense had agreed on before the case went to trial. It also closed the possibility of a lengthy jury trial where Connor could have faced a much heavier sentence if convicted. But 50 years in prison was still an enormous amount of time for someone who was only 19 years old at sentencing. An important condition of the plea deal was that Connor Hilton had to waive his right to appeal. That meant after sentencing, Connor could not return to a higher court to try to change the verdict or re-argue the case details. That decision was part of the plea deal Connor accepted when he agreed to plead guilty to murdering Ethan Riley and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against Ben Blick. Under Texas state law, a 50-year sentence did not mean Connor would serve exactly 50 years before having a chance at release consideration. In many cases, inmates can become eligible for parole after serving a significant portion of the sentence. In Connor Hilton's case, that meant he could become eligible for parole consideration after about 25 years. But that eligibility was not a guarantee. A parole board would have to review Connor's record in the future to decide whether he would be allowed to leave prison after the hearing concluded and the sentence was formally recorded. Connor Hilton was escorted out of the courtroom under police supervision. From there, he was transferred to Galveston County Jail, where he would stay temporarily before being moved to the Texas State Prison System to begin serving his long-term sentence. In an interview conducted after the trial, Connor spoke about the first hours after being incarcerated. He said the feeling of loneliness in prison was unbearable. It was the first time he had to face the reality that his life would play out behind bars for many years to come. But outside the prison, the consequences of the night of December 23, 2023 continued to linger in the lives of others. Ben Bleak was still in the process of recovering from severe brain injury caused by the gunshot to the head. That process stretched over many months and even years. Ben had to relearn many basic functions he could once perform naturally. Every step, every movement, every daily activity became part of a difficult recovery journey. For Ethan Riley's family, recovery in the usual sense was impossible. Ethan had died in the hospital on December 24, 2023, just one day after the shooting. He was only 18 years old. Ethan's family continued to remember their son, whom they described as a kind young man with a future ahead. Every Christmas since then carried memories of the day they received the news that their son could not survive. When the Connor Hilton case closed with a 50-year prison sentence, one question still lingered for many who had followed the case from the beginning. Did the defense claim about Accutane's side effects reflect the truth about Connor's state of mind on the night of the shooting? Or was it merely an explanation offered after 2 lives had been destroyed and a community had to face the irreversible consequences of a violent decision? If you want to follow more true crime investigation stories like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.